it's time for another rambling review. If you follow along in the vlogs, you know that I have been participating in this Reading the Booker long list book club that DD Reads hosts every month. And that's where I read things like Glory and Trust and Night Crawling, The Trees. And in December, we're actually reading two books. They're the really short books for the month. One of them is Treacle Walker, which I don't even have words for Treacle Walker at this point in time. So we're moving on. But the other book is Claire Keegan's Small Things Like These. And I had to stop and do a small little rambling review telling you how much I loved this tiny little book. This is super short. It was shortlisted for the Booker, not just longlisted, and I completely understand why this was so well received and was nominated for the Booker in 2022. So this is a very small and deceptive story. It's a very quiet story. It's a very small story. It's the kind of story where the author uses language so sparsely and perfectly that you don't need a lot on the page to say a lot. That is one of my most favorite things to see an author master, is this ability to use their words economically but powerfully at the same time. I always think back to something like Passing by Nella Larson when I find books like this, books where every word is very specifically chosen for the sentence, and no, there's no fillers, there's no fluff, there's no nothing. I believe there are some camps who feel like perhaps this book could have done a bit more, perhaps it was maybe a little too short, particularly as a Booker book, but I say no. I say that this book, the fact that it was so short and has such an impact is only a plus. It only makes me like this more. Because to be able to say, if you've ever followed me here and listened to any of my rambling reviews, you will know that I just kind of go on for too long, etc., etc. And you know what I don't have? An economy of words. I don't have that. I don't understand how to say a lot with very little. This is a skill, and a skill that needs to be rewarded, recognized, appreciated, shouted from the rooftops. So that's like the first thing I want to say. It's short, and the wording is perfect. It is just like what is being done and revealed so beautifully and slowly and just quietly throughout this book is perfection. So I've been going into these monthly reads as blind as I can be, because I just kind of want to experience the books, have them wash over me, etc., etc. What the heck is this book that I'm rambling on about and clearly showing that economy of language, brevity, all that is a skill that I do not have? So if you know anything about the Magdalen laundries in Ireland, if you know anything about the atrocities that the Catholic Church has put many women through in Ireland, in other places, but there's specific things that happened in Ireland and happened for a really long time with unwed mothers, poor mothers, just women that were vulnerable and susceptible to a lot of harm under the guise of helping. It went on for a really long time. It did not stop. The author's note does talk about it in the back here, and I'm just going to read you the author's note sort of quickly, and so you can get an understanding of the context of this story, and then we'll talk about the story. So it says, this is the author's note. This is a work of fiction based in no part on any individual or individuals. Ireland's last Magdalen laundry was not closed down until 1996. It is not known how many girls or women were concealed, incarcerated, and forced to labor in these institutions. 10,000 is the modest figure. 30,000 is probably more accurate. Most of the records from the Magdalen laundries were destroyed, lost, or made inaccessible. Rarely was any of these girls' or women's work recognized or acknowledged in any way. Many girls and women lost their babies. Some lost their lives. Some or most lost the lives they could have had. It is not known how many thousands of infants died in these institutions or were adopted out from the mother-baby homes. Earlier this year, the Mother and Baby Home Commission report found that 9,000 children died in just 18 of the institutions investigated. In 2014, historian Catherine Corliss made public her shocking discovery that 796 babies died between 1925 and 1961 in the Tuam home in the county of Galway. These institutions were run and financed by the Catholic Church in concert with the Irish state. So the government's not is complicit in all of this. No apology was issued by the Irish government over the Magdalen laundries until, I cannot say this word, I'm going to put the person's name on the screen, did so in 2013. So this is something that was going on for a really long time. This is one of those things that was kind of something that was known and unknown. The Catholic Church had an incredible amount of power for an incredibly long period of time, and a lot of that power meant that people were afraid to speak up or speak out against some of the things that they may have actually known were occurring. And that's kind of something that's happening in this book. So you have Bill Furlong. He's a coal and timber merchant in this small little town. It's Christmas season. It's the 1980s, and you forget that. I think that's a really important thing. Is throughout the story, I kept forgetting that it actually was the 1980s, because these all feel like things that should be outside of my lifetime, and they are 100% not outside of my lifetime. So I think as a coping mechanism kept trying to like push it into like more historical events as opposed to things that are of my time or modern events. Anyway, so you have Bill. He has a family with, I think he has 4 daughters and a wife, or 5 daughters. He's got a lot of women in his life. His mother was an unwed mother who was taken in by this very, well-off lady, and she housed them, fed them, clothed them, treated them very well in exchange for the mother kind of working on her farm. And he actually was, he had a really nice little life, him and his mother, and he grows up to be a very successful and generous man in the village, and not successful like he was rich, but he was just successful. Like he could pay his bills, but he couldn't buy everything. And this is a period in time where a lot of people are struggling, and you see the struggles, especially around Christmas time, of the people in this village as he goes around and he does his deliveries. And you see the people in their homes that have a lot of money as well, and how, they sit around and drink things out of long stem glasses and play the piano, and whereas other people are just struggling to pay their coal bills or are bartering to get coal. And Bill is a very generous person. You see him give money to different children who don't have any money because their father has drank it away. And you see sort of the opposite of him and his wife when she says things like, oh, well, if their father didn't drink the money away, then they wouldn't need any of this. So it's really their father's fault. And, Bill's like, but he can't help it. Because, alcoholism is a disease. He doesn't say that, but he understands that if the father could stop drinking, the father would stop drinking, but he can't stop drinking. So Bill is just this incredibly empathetic and compassionate person. And one day he is making a delivery to the nunnery and to the laundry, which is a big fixture in the town. Like one side of the wall is where his girls go to school. The other side of the wall is this mother-baby home, the laundry, all of that. And he happens to walk into somewhere he really shouldn't have been, and he sees what is actually happening to these girls, and it just eats away at him to the point where he has to do something, no matter how tiny. There's like a lady barkeep, and you have his wife, and they're both kind of like, you can't really do anything about it because it's the church and they have too much power. And you can tell how that's something that permeates through the entire culture of at least this town and definitely this country, because not this country, but in Ireland at this time, because you can't do anything. Like the wife is terrified of him saying anything, is basically like, put your head down and shut up, because if you do something about this, if you make too much stink, they're not going to use you as their coal and their, timber merchant, and that's going to affect our family. They're your biggest customer. Do you offend your biggest customer because they're morally incorrect? All of this is going on in these 110 pages of this book, and you just watch this man quietly go through his life And he takes you through a snapshot of like 1980s Ireland with the struggles of people, what's going on in these laundries, and how one man himself can't turn his eyes away from it, because this could have been his mother. This could have been him. He could have been one of these children. He could have these lost babies. This could have been his mom, one of these lost women. It could be one of his daughters. There's only this wall separating between these girls. Like, it could be one of, like, he is basically the luck of the draw that this doesn't touch his life more directly. And he only knows about it because he happened to walk in on it. Because nobody talks about it. Anybody who does know about it keeps their eyes down and says nothing, because there's just too much power in the church. And honestly, this book was phenomenal and is worth the read. We're not doing this discussion until the very beginning of January, and I'm probably going to read it again before we get there. This is, like, honestly, you can read this in like an hour. It is so good, and the writing is so wonderful, and some of just sort of the philosophical questions about what you do when you see something that is just so absolutely wrong. Those discussions are small and quiet and subtle, but they're brilliant. And I loved this book so very much. And I'm glad that I'm doing this reading the Booker, because I never would have picked this up, because I didn't realize this had anything to do with the Magdalene Laundries. I just kind of thought this was going to be like kind of like a sweet Christmas story. It is not a sweet Christmas story, and there's so much more to it than first meets the eye. And loved it. I absolutely loved this book. Please go out and read it. So far, I think this is the favorite of all the books I've read for the long list from the Booker, but there's so many more to go. We'll see. I'll do a final ranking whenever we get there, but please read Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. That's it. That's my rambling review. Like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
So just sit with me, talking to the night until the morning, building chemistry.